Hi, my name is Jessica Jeong, and this summer I had the chance to work with Dr. Kigabati to understand more about this butterfly, the bog copper, and specifically how its wing pattern differs between different populations. So why are we interested in the first place? Well, I think it all sort of circles back to us, specifically human activity, and whether it be deforestation or condo development, oftentimes human activity has a very profound effect on the animals and plants around us. One of the most common manifestations of this is habitat fragmentation. And that's when you have a large habitat get split into smaller chunks, and the population living here is consequently also split into smaller, more isolated communities. It can be hard to move between these different groups. So oftentimes there's a restriction in movement as well as genetic exchange, and consequently divergence can occur. That's where this little guy comes in. There are two traits of interest to us. Firstly, despite how he might appear on the screen, he's really small in real life. Another thing is that they really love cranberries, enough to live off it for their whole lives. So I guess you could say they occupy a very specific habitat niche. So both these traits mean that these guys often like to sort of stay where they are because they have everything they need. So they form naturally isolated communities that are often established for very long periods of time. We're interested in seeing how these sort of long-term naturally isolated bog copper populations can be sort of generalized to the more short-term but dramatic man-made habitat fragmentation. And actually, our results do show that there is significant morphological divergence between these bog copper groups. So in the long run, that's probably what's going to happen for these species affected by man-made habitat fragmentation. So throughout this project, it's been a fantastic opportunity to take away a lot of different skills, methods, and tools. But I think my biggest takeaway is that coming from coursework, a lot of times experiments in class are very stepwise, as in you do A, you get B, you get C, and then you hand that in for your mark. So I guess my preconceptions of research were a little bit like this. As you can see, very straightforward, very linear. But in practice, my experiment went a little bit more like this. A lot of back and forth and trial and error, and it can be really easy to get lost in this process. It doesn't help that another thing I learned is that sometimes science can get a little bit gray in that, for example, the same value, depending on maybe the consequences of your findings or your research design, can be interpreted differently. That's why I feel like my biggest takeaway from this project is that it's always very important to come back to the intent of your experiment as well as your methodology to help you navigate through this sometimes messy and sometimes ambiguous process. So thank you for your time.